Uncle, I'm actually very, very excited to unpack this conversation you had with Jordan. And I think what makes it so delicious for me, as many of your interviews are so full of paradox. And there's something consistent that I've noticed in a number of these conversations. So let me see if I can set it up correctly here, or so that it makes sense. But so much of what Jordan's bringing forward here is something that might be at least not intuitive to a lot of people in the kind of quote unquote financial independence community or movement. I think he refers to it as a community. But he's really saying that I hear sort of the central message. You know, one of these pieces of wisdom is that you are already enough, that this kind of meaningful, purpose-driven life matters, and that we can have that now. And there's some type of balance here, kind of seeming contradiction to the kind of conventional wisdom from those communities, right? Of forego pleasure, experience, all that. I think maybe the line that I often hear is, live the life others won't now so you can live the life others can't later. Something to that effect. But you're sacrificing, you're foregoing these experiences. I think he refers to it a lot in the conversation as deferred gratification, which is great. And I think both of us resonate a lot with this message, especially, maybe not so much in like kind of the hedonic aspect of just have as much fun and pleasure as you want, but to invest in meaning and experience and relationships. But he kind of came to that after he had been, by his admission, an achievement junkie for the better part of his life, achieved kind of this foundation of financial independence, had invested all of this work in becoming a, board certified physician, doing, all this work to develop himself and study. And then, lo and behold, he comes to this decision. Sometimes I wonder when I hear people like this, could it have happened the other way?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, and that's what's awesome is that he's breaking our notions of what should happen at multiple points in his trajectory. So he's a doctor doing all this like doctor stuff. From the outside, I would think, oh, this is a person who's really found their purpose and their meaning, and they're here to serve. But actually, that's not what it was for him. He was just like, it had to do with his like father's like dying wish, and then him being an achievement junkie. And then so for him, like leaving that was a liberation of getting closer to his purpose. And then like leaving the whole like financial world of like money was like further liberation when he realized like what he wants to do is just like share with people and speak and write and present and connect with people that way. He didn't want to be like this like saintly physician on the streets of Calcutta. He wanted to like hang out and like talk with people and teach in a way that was connectful and meaningful for everyone.
He was saving lives, but what he really wanted to do was have a podcast like you.
Yeah, totally. Exactly. So we all have this like individual sense of like meaning, and that process, the journey is full of these paradoxes, and that whole kind of like in the integral world, the whole like spiral of like, oh yeah, I left that thing that everyone thought was meaningful, and I did this other thing that everyone thought was like so great and to have all this money, and then I left that thing as I get closer and closer to what I want.
Okay. So I'm setting this up as this kind of paradox, right? That he's presented. I think you get that, right? That there's this like sense of achievement and the security that just sound financial investment decisions can provide for you. On the other hand, he's having this revelation, this realization, this insight that he's applying into his own life, into sharing with his children and sharing with his audience on his podcast and his readership in his book, that it's not everything. Make decisions based on meaning, experience, and rich relationships now, where you can. But it's not black or white. And one thing that I notice, what I'm noticing in this conversation, is that he's done that in a certain sequence. And in my experience, witnessing people, it happens in a certain sequence, right? So if he had made this decision first, before he pursued any of these things, before he was an achievement junkie, that it would have precluded some of these other things happening for him. So it kind of had to happen in this order, no?
Jeez, I don't know. Maybe for him, but there's definitely like, okay. So I'm still not going to answer your question, but I'm gonna go from a different direction. Yeah. So one of the things that this financial independence world that I really learned from them, and that I think is really powerful, and it's part of our own work, is that happiness and meaning and all these different areas of life are not incompatible with financial success. Because that's what I thought for most of, like, that's a part of my trajectory. And I think you could have maybe relate to this as a kind of from like the activist or like Gandhian movement, was that like there's a moral superiority in voluntary poverty, or you kind of have to choose. Like you can be a really good person and you can be tied to your moral ideals and be really spiritual and really focus on relationships, or you could have money. And I feel like one thing that's beautiful about what they're saying is that's not true. And I feel like that's a key insight, and that insight can happen in different orders. You can be like, all right, I'm going to focus on developing myself as like a full, loving and connectful human being. And then you can focus on like, oh, and I'm also going to be financially secure, so I'm not feeling stress and uncertainty. Or you could do that in the other order as well.
Okay, well, I think you did understand the question, answered it. I think that's brilliant, and I think intuitively that's what I'm getting from the conversation from Jordan's message. It's not an either or.
Yeah, which is so. It's so. I mean, just take that in for a second. Isn't that relaxing?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think any false dilemma that resolves into kind of nuance and the realization that you actually have like a subtler choice and more agency than you thought.
I kind of want you to take that in a little bit deeper. I want you close your eyes, because it means a lot. It's like you can, everyone listening can focus on doing what gives you meaning, and that doesn't have to be fundamentally opposed to financial success. You could do it at the same time. You don't have to sacrifice. Don't you just feel so relaxed right now?
I feel super relaxed, except that I've had 4 cups of coffee. So I might not have access to the depth of relaxation that you're after. But no, I think it's immensely liberating to not be stuck in this kind of black and white polarity. But I retain this curiosity about, it's like, well, at least for Jordan, it seems like he had to go through those phases in the order, in the sequence that he did. And I'm so glad he did. Another thing that came out of that, maybe just kind of a slight left turn, is in your discussion with him about purpose. And I thought that illustrated an aspect of that purpose work that I think is often missed. When we discuss this with people, with our clients, I think there's an inclination to kind of think of this as a paint by numbers kind of reductive process of, okay, sit down, I do the assignment, come back, I have my purpose, and my purpose is plugged in, and then I can kind of go about it and do the thing. But in my experience, it's a lot more creative. It's a lot more, you're really in communion with this thing. And I see in this interview with Jordan, it's like, it's not just like, oh, I got my purpose, and then boop, that's good for the rest, that's set, right? There's like this real dynamic element to it. And it's so tied up with his identity, right? It has so much to do with his story with his father, and that relationship and kind of that, impulse to, like you said, like to satisfy this thing on the man's deathbed, like how much purpose that would inform somebody with. I mean, few of us are lucky enough to have something so like, wow, purpose delivered on like kind of on a platter for him. And then to go through that was like, wow, that purpose did serve that stage in his life. And so did that identity, right? And then he realizes, like, not because, I guess what I'm left wondering is like, if he had turned his back or not given it his all, like it's kind of like the fact that he fully explored that and achieved kind of the goals that he had set for himself under the umbrella of that purpose and identity, because he had given it his all. Then it like opened itself to him to transition and explore this new identity.
Okay. Yeah. So I got 2 things that came to me based on that. And one is related to the fact that if anyone ever watches the video of this, you're wearing this kind of like cowl. It's like a dungeon crawling thing. And so I'm imagining you in this like maze holding a lantern, and this information or these experiences, like Jordan's experience with his father, is providing a certain amount of light that allows us to see like where we need to go in the maze. But it's not because of all the twists and turns, it can't show us how to get out of the maze. It's just like where to go for this next phase. And then when you get to that next wall or dead end and you have to like turn and look around, there's like movement and volition and intention, and you have to let go of the direction you've been going in order to actually get to the end of the maze. So he's like, it's this like stage process that he's going through. That's one thing. And the second is it reminded me of this interview we did with Zarina a few weeks or months ago, the drummer, if you remember that one. Yeah. And then I followed up with her after that. And she said that upon hearing the interview, she had this whole realization about her path with drumming, because she was feeling like kind of moving into a different phase with it. And she heard the interview and she's like, you know what? I did what I needed to do with drumming. Like I accomplished my goal. And again, she had this sense of liberation of like, now it's okay if I do something else. Like Baba gave me a task to do and I did it.
And I did it.
And I fulfilled it. And now it's okay if I do something else.
Right. Yeah. Well, the first thing that comes to me based on the two things you shared is that you probably played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons as a child. Is that true?
It's true. And the more I hang out, I've been hanging out with kind of 8 to 12-year-olds recently. And my daughter's 5, but I have all these other kids in my life and we're hanging out. I just can't think of anything better for these people to be doing than D&D, Dungeons and Dragons. It's just so creative, especially if you're like hiking, you're like outside, you're in nature, and you're playing this kind of version of it where it's just pure imagination and storytelling. It's just theater. I don't know. It just strikes me as so wholesome, which is the opposite of the messaging I got from the Christian fundamentalists when I was playing it in middle school, where they said it was satanic. I don't know if anyone even remembers that.
I'm just going to just trap you right there and use that as a segue to the other thing that I was going to say, because I think actually this is a perfect tie-in to what I'm sensing and getting at in this conversation, which is sort of the real value of creativity in our lives, the real value of play. And, in my background, like I have a theater background, but, my kind of initiation into that world was through ritual theater. And it proposed this idea of theater that's not just like for entertainment, but this is actually like a central function in our life as a community, and in your life as an individual. And that we like ritual and creativity and theater, when we look at it from that angle, is really like infused through our entire lives. And so much what you're saying about like, kind of Zarina, we could talk about Jordan, but this kind of accomplishing a goal and that accomplishment or that task or getting through that mission, if you're kind of in this play or in this theater of your life, opens itself like this treasure chest to another phase or stage or another chamber of the dungeon, right? And when we engage with it in this creative way, instead of thinking, oh, I have a purpose, I'm going to know it, I'm going to find it out, and then I'm going to, it's going to be this kind of rote thing. When we have this creative, we're really in what you've been talking about so much on this, the hero's journey, I guess in a way that's presented. I'm having this realization right now, like talking to you and listening to these interviews, that it can be so much more playful. There's so much more creativity that leads us into what's actually our joy, what's our love, and what's our work in this world.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that's like, imagine doing it the other way. Like there's two ways to do it. There's the way of creativity. And then there's the way of, I don't know what the right word is, but my hand is kind of like over my head, and like there's like the way of like the hammer, or like, you're going to do this. You're going to do this because you're going to make money, or you're going to do this because your father needs it, or you're going to do this because you have to. It's very imposed in this kind of like self-violent way, and that you can get the same results, I think, either way, but our conscious experience is going to be very different.
Well, wouldn't you say that that's more or less the default?
For me, sure, certainly.
The latter, it's kind of the default.
Like when I started meditating, that was how it was. It's like, you're gonna fucking meditate. You're gonna force that mind into meditating. You're gonna steer and meditate. And then it took me years to learn that, like, oh, this is actually a game, and the point of this game is to fail and to see how I react to myself when I fail. And I've been failing in that reaction for many years. It's a kindness game. It's basically a kindness game.
Okay, well, I have one more takeaway from the interview I'd like to share, and maybe it's that is somewhat of a good lead in because, I think it is a game. This process can be playful and experimental, right? Everything we just said about creativity. And yet the stakes are extremely high for all of us in this thing called life. So the death is just there implicit for all of us and all around us through our entire lives. I mean, look at Jordan, very early experience with his father. So the stakes are very high, even though we have this potential or this opening to creativity and play. And something that I thought was really profound, and the test that I've extracted from this interview for me to run is, and we know other people like this. We have a mutual friend who volunteered in hospice for some time and walked away with some, I think, probably, I don't want to speak for him, but in my understanding, some of the most profound insights of his life, sitting with dying people. And I decided I'd like to volunteer. I don't know what the shape or demand. I haven't actually explored this yet. But listening to Jordan, listening to your conversation about this subject, it's provided so much context about the stakes. And I hear him holding those two things so nobly is the word I want to say. It puts context, whereas, I think we could engage with play and creativity in a way that could give the impression of something frivolous or cavalier, but when you hold that play and that creativity in the context of really what's on the table here, which is our entire lives and the lives of those we love, then it's really, again, this sort of holding this paradox feels like there's just so much soul to what he's offering, where it could just be kind of 10 steps to success, live your best life, kind of, window dressing, anything you might just see kind of in internet marketing, whatever. But there's so much soul. And it seems to me, because it's really informed by how much time he's spent with people at the end of their lives.
Yeah. No, it's beautiful. And I love that assignment you're going to do. And I can think of so many trippy, beautiful things that you could do with those people.
Yeah. I can't wait to get back to you about this. And, at the risk of having too many concurrent experiments running, I can see like by the end of this quarter, it's just going to be my entire life will just be a laboratory of tests and assignments that I've picked up. But okay, so this is, I think, officially the second one that I'll be running. And yeah, I'll just commit to that right now to reach out to some places in the area and see what that might look like. Yeah.
And even if you just do it once, I think it can be deep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Could I add one more thing?
I wish you would, actually, because I was feeling like this conversation was a little incomplete.
So it's on that creativity piece, and it's going back to the sense of deep relaxation I experience, and I hope we all experience when contemplating our occasional expression of our purpose, how we use our time to serve, and our ability to support ourselves and our family are harmonious and not mutually exclusive. And my sense, my prescription, my injunction for that is that the thing that bridges those two worlds is creativity. It's that same creativity that's like, okay, these are the things I know I need to do with my days. These are the ways I know I need to express myself. And then this is the society I'm in, and this is what the society needs and values and appreciates and, uses for its healing. How do I make those things come together? It may not be immediately apparent, but I think the creativity is it's like the little bit of fairy dust that's going to allow those things to converge.
Yeah, I would take it out of the fairy dust. I know you're still in the Legend of Zelda realm here, but I think it's the lifeblood. I mean, it's the fundamental essence of how we make our way. Maybe you'll permit a little story that I heard from a great teacher of mine, Felix Ivanov, one of the greatest clowns I've ever met. He's a fight choreographer for the Metropolitan Opera. He teaches all over New York State, and he's an excellent director, excellent clown. That was his kind of primary thing. He trained at the Vakhtangov School in Moscow, this famous institution for clowning. And he was telling me and my friend, we would go out on the weekends to visit him and his wife out in Brighton Beach, New York. And we'd have tea and just talk about art and stuff. And he was sitting there with his wife. His wife was an artist, an artisan. She'd make masks. And he told us his story relating to creativity. What's the point? What are you guys doing? What do you think you're doing as artists? What does it mean to be an artist? And he talked about traveling out to Sochi, which is kind of this beach in Russia. And they traveled there. They just had got like these one-way tickets, and they didn't have a plan for getting back. So they just decided to go spend the weekend at the beach. They didn't have any money, and they didn't have any money to get back. So they decided to do is his wife went out really early in the morning, gathered a bunch of shells and stones and stuff, and made a whole cast of characters, these masks. And Felix invented a play playing each one of these characters with these masks. They spent all day. They did like 4 performances there just in public and raised enough money to get home back to Moscow. And maybe it's not that profound to you or the listener, but for me, it just crystallized this thing of art and survival. And he was like, that's really what it is. You make something where there was nothing. And just out of his creativity, just out of what they found, these found objects, his own instrument, his own comedy, his own thing created this possibility to get home.
Beautiful. And what I love about that is not just that they created something from nothing, but that something was just like clearly needed by the other people there on the beach, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's not just like arbitrary, like I just created something, but it's something that delighted people, something that brought relief or, something that you created value for another human being. Yeah.
Gorgeous.
Cool. Yeah. Very beautiful. Thanks for this conversation, Ankur.
Yeah. Thank you, Nate. It's cool.
I want to thank everyone for listening, and make sure to connect with us in any way that you can. Find our email in the show notes, find our Twitter handle, get a hold of us. We'd love to hear from you. We really, really, really appreciate your time and attention. We'll talk to you next time.
That concludes another episode of the 10,000 Heroes Show. Thanks again for listening, and I hope that this has contributed in some small way to your own personal journey of heroism. I'd like to give a shout out to Pierre for the episode artwork, DJ Plainview for the theme music, and to our producer-editor, Martine. This podcast is sponsored by Momentum Lab, our year-long coaching program providing insight, accountability, a community of excellence, and one-on-one support. I encourage anyone who's intrigued to go to whatismomentumlab.com and explore. Finally, I love communication. If this episode has impacted your life in any way, let me know. Our email is info@10kh.show, and there's other ways to contact us in the show notes. Thank you. Have a wonderful day and take care.